Hey, it's Vincent here, and welcome to Vincent Games, your untapped source of Magic the Gathering info, tips, and discussion. A big part of this channel are deck techs and strategies to help us improve and think about the game in a different way, so if you're new here, consider subscribing and become part of the conversation. A little while ago, I did a video on Solar Flare in Standard. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to check that out, but the deck essentially focused on reanimating big threats from the graveyard whilst controlling the board. With Hour of Devastation on the horizon, and Glorybringer a big part of the post-ban Standard format, I wanted to revisit this necromantic strategy. Why? Well, almost entirely because of this card. Razaketh the Foulblooded. I mean, who doesn't like an 8/8 flying demon with trample? Oh, and what's that text? Pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature, get whatever you want from your library. Okay. At 8 mana, this guy would normally be unplayable, but let's not forget that we don't intend to play fair. So how are we going to cheat him in? Aetherworks Marvel. Nah, just kidding. Good riddance to that thing. Although, speaking of energy, we do have an energy theme in this deck. 4 Attune with Aether, 4 Servant of the Conduit, and 4 Harness Lightning. This set of 3 cards have proven their worth in Standard, Attune acting as a weird tap land of sorts, of any colour we need whilst providing an energy boost, Servant to help us ramp and make energy if the mana boost isn't required, and Harness Lightning is one of the best removal spells in the format. This little trifactor is a solid place to start. We have mana, energy, and servants to sacrifice to Razaketh once they become irrelevant. So we're off to the races, but we need a way to put Mr. Foulblooded into the graveyard. No problem. 4 Grim Flayer, 2 Vessel of Nascency, 1 Grapple with a Past, and a Sinister Concoction should help with this. Vessel and Grapple both shine here, providing card selection whilst filling up the graveyard with our heavy hitters, and to activate Delirium for Grim Flayer. Speaking of Grim Flayer, this card is excellent, and is not only going to filter our draws, but it's going to actively help our deck strategy. Not only that, but it will also put early pressure on our opponent, so we don't just have to durdle through the early games or be reactive. If you do like a bit of durdling though, this deck also runs 3 Woodweaver's Puzzleknot and 2 Traverse the Ulvenwald. These additions really help to round out the energy and Delirium package. Traverse can help you develop your mana, or tutor for a game-winning threat once you have Delirium. Puzzleknot gives you a life buffer and some energy, both of which are welcome when trying to get to the late game. And let's not overlook the fact that it's also an artifact to help you turn on Delirium. At 5 mana, we have 1 Ishkanah Grafwidow, 2 Glorybringer, and 3 Liliana Death's Majesty. Hopefully you can now begin to see that this deck is all about value. With the help of our mana dorks and fixing, we have a nice diversity of threats here. Ishkanah gums up the ground nicely against aggro decks, and Glorybringer is a potent threat and removal all in one. What really sets this deck apart though is Liliana. If your opponent deals with your Glorybringer, well, you can just use her to bring it back and incinerate something else. If reanimating Glorybringers isn't spicy enough for you, then don't forget about old Razaketh. This deck is running 2, along with 1 Demon of Dark Schemes and 1 Noxious Gearhuld. Gearhuld is exactly what the Necromancer ordered, as getting 2 uses out of this enter the battlefield effect is insane. And remember all that energy you made with those Attunes and Puzzleknots? Well, Demon of Dark Schemes is the payoff. If you're able to untap with this card in play, then you can do silly, silly things. The sky, or in this case, the graveyard's the limit. Lastly, to round out the deck, we have 1 Ever After, 2 Fatal Push, and 1 Never to Return. Reanimating any 2 of your big creatures is devastating. Imagine casting Ever After on Gearhuld and Ishkanah. Disgusting. Push is super efficient, and Never is a bit of insurance against Planeswalkers, Mana Flood, and milling your removal instead of creatures. As for the lands, we have 4 Aether Hub, 4 Blooming Marsh, and 2 Hissing Quagmire. Green and black are the colours we want the most, so Blooming Marsh is a no-brainer. Aether Hub works well with our energy theme, and is an awesome conclusion in any deck that can support it. Only 2 man lands, as we need the other slots to give us red mana, 2 Evolving Wilds to help us get Delirium, as well as 2 Smoldering Marsh for the extra red sources. Lastly, we have 4 Forest, 2 Mountain, and 1 Swamp. We want untapped green early, and the second mountain is helpful to cast our red spells, and also necessary in case our red sources get milled away. Speaking of casting our threats, this Reanimator deck is not afraid to do this. Whilst you are building up to raising big demons from the dead with Liliana or Ever After, this deck also has many other avenues to victory. You can cast Grim Flayers, maybe even multiple Grim Flayers, and force Delirium early to beat your opponent down with 4/4s. Or you can set up Servant of the Conduit to power out a turn 4 Glorybringer or Ishkanah. Or you can even play a reactive game, going up the board, aggressively trading with your opponent's creatures, controlling the game with removal, and then out-attritioning your opponent by recurring your haymakers. I can imagine this deck having a lot of lines and having plenty of outs to play to, as well as just having to generate draws. Imagine a scenario, for example, where you have a Servant of the Conduit and Liliana in play, and a Razaketh in the graveyard. You can reanimate Razaketh and use his ability to sacrifice the Servant to fetch up a Glorybringer to put 12 power of flying creatures on the board. If they then try to kill your Glorybringer, you could then sacrifice it in response and tutor something else instead. Even the ability to tutor a kill spell in this situation and deal with an opposing threat is great. As for the sideboard, this is likely to change depending on your expected meta or how standard unfolds with the rest of Hour of Devastation, but a nice starting point would be 1 Yahenni's Expertise, 3 Radiant Flames, and 1 Linvala for aggro. These are also fine cards versus Mardu vehicles, and 2 Kalitas could also help here. 1 Sphinx of the Final Word, 1 Worldbreaker, 3 Transgress the Mind for control matchups. Ob Nixilis could also come in against them as another angle of attack, and he is also useful against team of monsters or mid-range as repeatable removal. Lastly, 2 Hour of Glory as a way to exile indestructible creatures. And that's the deck. It would be awesome to see Liliana Death's Majesty take off in Standard, as she really is cool and I think potentially very, very powerful. There are many other cards you can include, including Liliana the Last Hope, Ulamog, more removal, or even just solid mid-range cards like Tireless Tracker. If you want to try something like this out at your FNM, let me know how it goes. Are there any cards you feel I've missed out? Would you change anything in the deck? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this, then why not subscribe? You'll keep up to date with all my future videos and deck techs as I post them. If you want to see my last deck tech, then check out the links in the video and below. Feel free to request any decks that you want to see in the comments too. If you're interested in even more MTG content, then I also record a podcast called Glimmer of Genius, the link for which can be found in the description below. If you like what you see, then hit that like button, follow me on Facebook, links in the description, or share the video. It shows your support for the channel, keeps the ideas flowing, and gets you involved in the discussion. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.